This is Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
Careful. You could be the next Church of Scotland. This is Wretched Radio. Liberalism is never satisfied. It is an insidious ideology that creeps its way into sound institutions and wrecks them. I suppose you could search high and low for a liberal organization that started out liberal, but more often than not, you find good institutions, sound biblical institutions that get infected by liberalism. It is buckling under the pressure of the times to become more a part of the world, to be more acceptable, and to be more accepted. And so it is, liberalism gently opens up the door, walks in announcing, we're here to help, when in reality, they march in to take over and to conquer and to ultimately overturn the basis, the foundation of why these institutions were initiated in the first place. I think that was redundant. Could it be you and I are next? We are watching it happen right now in Western civilization. There's a new bunch of threats that are knocking on the door of the church, and they are guised rather nicely. Hey, we're a helpful analytical tool. Let us in. And if you do, I'm telling you, you will become like the Church of Scotland, but a lot faster. Because it is an insidious worldview that seeks to divide, undermine, overthrow, erase, change, separate. And that's what it does. How can that be a good thing for the church? And I just wonder if there aren't times when we're more open to allowing bad ideologies in, because we have forgotten what it has taken to get us here. Have we forgotten, like the Church of Scotland likely has, what men and women went through? There were hundreds of martyrs under Bloody Mary. Mary, Queen of Scots, a nightmare. John Knox having to endure persecution. He had to run. He was on the lam. He was a hunted man. And yet he thundered the gospel. And today, because he's buried now in a parking lot, it seems that the Church of Scotland has forgotten its heritage. And the result, not exclusively on the shoulders of forgetting history, but in part because they've forgotten their Protestant heritage, they're now just a liberal mess. And we will be too.
This young preacher was John Knox. And the reason John Knox is now in Geneva is there is a woman who has become the Queen of England. Her name is Mary I, or Mary Tudor, who becomes Bloody Mary. There's a reason why she's called Bloody Mary. As she burned at the stake some 288 Protestants, most of whom were blacksmiths and businessmen and housewives and children. She was a ruthless tyrant. And John Knox, as well as many, such as John Foxe, who wrote Foxe's Book of Martyrs, fled from England for their life. Others chose to stay. Knox fled. God has Knox brought to Geneva to sit under the theologian, to sit under the greatest expositor perhaps the church has ever had in John Calvin. And when Bloody Mary dies in 1558, John Knox returns to Scotland to start the Scottish Reformation in 1559. And John Knox hit Scotland like a Category 5 hurricane. John Knox lands just outside of Edinburgh. He writes the doctrinal statement for the Church of Scotland. He writes the book of public worship and church order for Scotland. John Knox puts the Reformation in place in Scotland. He becomes famous for his confrontations with Mary, Queen of Scots. John Knox preached in the most prominent pulpit in all of Scotland, St. Giles Cathedral, that is located in Edinburgh on the Royal Mile, in between the Edinburgh Castle and the Holyrood Palace. It was a massive Catholic cathedral that the Reformers have now taken over. And it would hold as many as 3,000 people. It's an enormous edifice. And there John Knox preached the Word of God, and he saw himself as a trumpet blast. John Knox ends up having to flee Edinburgh for his own life. He goes to St. Andrews. He's there in 1571 and 1572. He returns to Edinburgh in 1572, which will be the last year of his life. And John Knox is now a frail old man. He is a small Scotsman. He realizes that he cannot preach any longer in this enormous building that he must fill up with his voice. So he has his successor brought to him from Aberdeen. And the last time John Knox enters the pulpit at St. Giles is to lay hands on his successor shortly before he dies. His successor is named James Lawson. John Knox will shortly thereafter die in a matter of 2 months. He is buried outside the St. Giles in the churchyard. And there the ambassador, as they buried him, said, "Here lies a man who never feared another man." He was as bold as a lion. He was a fearless preacher who was the force that turned a nation around.
Who? I just pave over it. We don't need his gravestone. We don't need that recollection. Be warned, if we forget our Protestant heritage, we do so at our own peril. Good evening, my fellow totally depraved Americans.